Does the author of the post change the way you receive the info? This conversation was originally started in the thread. I'd be curious to know what the lady in the example review would say if she were on this forum and the example was from someone other than her. Would it bother her? AllThings new. Are you talking about the restaurant review? What makes you think a lady wrote it? Russ H. Yes, I was, and you know what, I have no idea. I went back and looked at it again and I have no idea what made me think that. I don't know if it was something I saw when I first read it or something someone commented on that made that connection or what. Interesting. I'd still be curious what that person would think reading it from this perspective. I had to laugh when I read this, because I thought a woman wrote this as well. I suppose because of, A. the fact that most guys wouldn't take the time to write a friggin' review of dinner, B. of the lemon chicken they had for dinner, or C. the pros and cons of the dessert menu. Sexist, I know, but that's what I picked up on subconsciously. I actually thought a guy wrote the review. I left my comment gender neutral before. I thought it was a guy because the writer complained about how little meat there was on the chicken. Usually guys complain about portion size. This is fascinating stuff. Ties right in W or the sex is a thread, and ATW's comments that she's tired of people assuming she's a guy when she posts here. I think it's psychological, at least for some of us. How we see the writer says something of how we see the world, our impressions, preconceptions, and judgments. As I said, fascinating. Russ H. So far, of those who have spoken up, the reader is identifying the writer as their own sex. Yves and I thought female and bio thought male. Interesting? Heck. I think you may be onto something here. AllThings new. When I unconsciously guess at a writer's sex, I often think of them as male in part B or C. I identify W or what they are saying, so it goes along W or that to think they are also male like me. It seems we read things from a perspective of how is this like me, the chicken portion size, the dessert comments, and if there is resonance, we unconsciously think the writer must be the same sex as me. How about this for a shock? Since I had unconsciously assumed you were male, AllThings new, I was all the more fascinated that you thought the op was a woman as it went against this same-sex assumption. But I never stopped to consider that you were a woman. I'd already made that unconscious mistake with your gender. This is very cool. Thanks to all of you for your input. Another great thread that went in an entirely different direction than I ever would have figured. SMX7 Russ H. I agree that this thread has morphed into something fascinating. I also thought AllThings new was male. I suppose we all have different subconscious gender markers as to what's what and who's who. Very interesting. See, now you just contradicted the theory, SMX4. Wow. This thread is cracking me up. I haven't read it for a few days, and I come back to this. I never even considered the gender of the review writer. Does that mean I am asexual? On spelling and grammar, I suck at both. I have struggled with them since I learned to read and write. I make a ton of mistakes, all the time. Yuck. I know it is a horrible weakness of mine. I am in complete awe of those that can write something and self-correct rather than relying on either spell check or another person. Only if you can reproduce on your own, SMXF. I can't spell and I'm a published author. But then again, I can't multiply and I'm an accountant. Grinning. It isn't about what you can do but rather, whether you care enough to compensate for your shortfalls. I thought AllThings new was female. Why? Because a man is less likely to use Z as a subfuzz. This is hilarious. Up until now, in my head AllThings new was a guy. Up until a few weeks ago, Vesklesnky talk about being hard to spell was a guy. The reviewer was a gal in my head. For some reason though, ATW has never confused me. Why the confusions in my head guys tend to be more blunt, which I find refreshing. I viewed AllThings new and Jscott as pretty blunt, so they fell into that category in my head. The food critic used too many words to be a guy in my worldview. My stereotypical guy response would be the food sucked BTW. The most annoying thing about this thread is knowing how much everyone is looking for misspells. I am deliberately avoiding words I know I typically screw up just so I do not feel the wrath of Russ. Perhaps I need to install a gender identifier in the postbit. Lots of people think Yves is a male and I didn't know AllThings was female. Must have been the car in the avatar. I speculated the reviewer of the lemon chicken was male. Really? I don't agree. What does gender have to do with financial or fast lane advice? It is the same reason I try not to focus on the age field that much, to avoid any bias I could have about it. If a 16-year-old gives me advice that is good for me, then great. Same thing if the advice comes from a man or a woman. Notice how long I've been on the forum. I put the avatar on thinking we all should use cars, as that was how it started, so I used a car that was my dream car when I was a kid. When people were surprised to find I was female, I figured it was the car. Although I am clearly all woman, the NoLimitsLadies site gives that away. Don't think we need a gender indicator.Well, until we have a meetup.I'll never forget Jscott Gecko's goofwhen I introduced myself and he expected an Asian KimberI married into Chin.Priceless and blackmail worthy. Yep, it was the car that threw me off. I don't want to start a war here or get anyone up in arms, so mods feel free to delete this if it goes tilt. And Russ I have a newfound freedom knowing you will take care of any grammar and spelling errors. Banana, I would start a new thread but it seems to lose relevance W or O some of the preceding posts, but you can move it if you want. We know it doesn't matter to most here who's what gender, race or whatever and all that. Everyone here is quite accepting and open. K. This is not directed at Kurt, it's for anyone, he just made me go. How differently might you read what I write now? How differently might you respond? Okay, let's change that and not make it personal to me or you, just trying to get us on the same page. Isn't it a fact that we all see things through our own filters whether we realize it or not? We all try to be fair and equal and politically correct, but we all know there are differences between genders, cultures etc., and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses, right? Statistically, men are better at some things and women better at other things. Yes, there are exceptions, but it's just the way we are built. That's where the uniqueness and beauty come from. But I do think whether we're conscious of it or not, we use different filters when we're relating. Thoughts? I respect everybody's words equally. Honestly, though, I probably do think about things differently depending on where I hear it from, either consciously or unconsciously. I don't mean anything by it, though. I just think it helps to understand things when you realize where the person speaking is coming from. Yes, this is the kind of thing I'm getting at here. Well, it is important that you do care who it is coming from, but only because of past experience. I obviously will hold on high away a comment from Russ if the topic is about making a plan, rehabs, or B&Bs than if it comes from MJ. The opposite would hold true if the topic is internet businesses. But I do try to isolate gender and age from the substance of the advice or comment because I do know I have filters and will hold things differently depending on who says what. Do I think that is right? No. Do I wish it were different and am I working on improving it? Yes. Something I've learned is that stereotypes do not always hold true, especially in this forum. Success is worth following and emulating. Subjectivity is part of who we are, isn't it? I'm going to change my avatar to a picture of a woman and see how many people think I'm female. Maybe you could change your name to 2040. SMX4 inside joke. For me it does not affect how the message is received. I just find it interesting when my assumptions are proven wrong. One of my favorite things is to find out my assumptions on something were wrong. This forces me to evaluate why I assumed what I did and follow the logic breakdown.From either gender. I am still a student waiting to learn.btw. Russ, was there any clue in the name of the reviewer which will solve this mystery? Lol. Very cool thread. In public I tend to treat women differently than men. I treat them with far more respect. Just my upbringing. Don't think I would change that if I could. On a forum, I really don't think about it much. I'm more interested in what the poster has to say, especially on this forum. When I read an article that has a lot of gender tones to it, I take notice. To be honest, I really don't like when authors do that. I could care less if you are female or male. I care about the subject. AllThings new, I did think male. I apologize for that. No need for apology. I'm just finding the whole concept very interesting. Nope. Sorry. I have the same problem. Or the posters on the TripAdvisor forums have assumed them to be male or female in the past, and have been wrong on both counts. SMX4: Russ H. Yeah, I've been admiring Stevio's new avatar. Guess he wants us to unconsciously think he's a really, really smart dog. SMXF: Russ H. I'm liking Yves's new avatar.So. I remember 2040 from Road forums. Is that bio or was there a misunderstanding of some sort for the inside joke? Stevio was 2040. Definitely an interesting thread here. I guess I'm in the minority in that I always thought AllThings new was female. I'll take chocolate chip, please. There must have been something in an old thread that indicated to me that this was the case. I wonder how many more false gender assumptions would have been made had there not been an introduction thread. I guess part of our individual subconscious evaluations stem from how we feel each sex communicates, perhaps based on upbringing or social conditioning. Commanding tone? Passive? Wise old guy? Gal? Motherly? Fatherly? There must be some subtle indicators that trigger our responses. Wow. Something I really never considered. John. Does the author matter? Good advice is rare. I don't discard any of it if I do my own research on all of it. However, I'll be politically incorrect and say that when a successful woman stands up and gives advice, I pay more attention. Because we have more in common and there are some unique issues and barriers to success that come with being female, I figure the advice will be more targeted to me personally. I changed my name because people thought I was female. It is because I want to set the way back machine Sherman. The kid was always going back in time and learning lessons. Plus I feel like the old dog on these forums. SMX4. Thanks. I couldn't find a pic of a great white eating a slow sign, or a spammer, so this one will do for now. Nicely put. How old are you, Steve? Russ H. Turn 50 in May. And Viv, this bud's for you, put it together in a few minutes. No charge, lol. Thought you had a cool idea, John. I think there is, although I can't say where, cause it's not something I was being careful to hide. I don't think recognizing our differences is necessarily a bad thing on its face. I'm only 3 years behind you, bud. BTW, I like the new avatar, !! Russ H. Wow, you have been around the forums for a long time. That name is about 5 or 6 years old. Your smart dog assessment prompted the change. SMX9: This avatar is more fitting with the fast lane. You are getting old. At least we can still learn new tricks. icon_super. Stevio, your new avatar looks so familiar, but I can't place it. Another Rocky and Bullwinkle spin-off? And I agree, very much fits the fast lane image. Or a dose of self-deprecating humor. Gotta love that. Russ H. Oops. Just saw your other thread. Reader, thanks. It looked so familiar, it was driving me nuts. SMX4 Russ H.